For better or worse, people are fascinated by crime. The popularity of channels like JCS earlier this year indicates that we'll always be intrigued by how and why criminals act. Clever ones who evade capture and charismatic ones who could talk their way out of anything while committing obscene crimes become especially popular. But there's another side to the coin. Ever since Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's rise to fame, the idea of a detective clever enough to solve any conceivable mystery has equally fascinated the imaginations of people across the planet. Sherlock Holmes has persisted for over 100 years, and we've seen characters like Kato, Columbo, Monk, Nancy Drew, Scooby-Doo, Green Moose, Guava Juice, and of course, Batman. Many of these are detectives who push the envelope in their respective universes and tackle cases that confound even the most experienced professionals. But at the top of this Wikipedia article lies none other than L. I'm Zero, this is Kato, and today, let's talk about the world's greatest detective. I am known as a Death Note fan, but surprisingly enough, I've never really talked about L at length. I really just make occasional affectionate comments about L during semi-related Death Note videos. So I'm going to make a new video series to set the record straight. I love L. I love L so much, I read the Death Note spin-off one-shots just to get more L content. Well, duh, right? Light Yagami is a pretty divisive character, but everyone loves L. I even knew real-life Kira supporters who were conflicted about wanting Light to win if it meant that L had to die. He's probably among the most popular antagonists ever. We adore L for his defiant individuality. Even if it offends others, he's going to do things his way no matter what. He's going to sit weird, he's going to eat nothing but highly sugary snacks. He'll tell jokes without caring if they land, and bribe you with a strawberry. Of course, this also extends to his investigative style. There are plenty of funny moments where L explains his thoughts or his plans to a chorus of slack-jawed and morally indignant detectives. L manages to push the boundaries of what's acceptable through charming memes. It's an interesting conflict, wondering when the excuse of "it's to catch Kira" will finally cease to suffice. L represents an escalation in the world's greatest detective meta. Sherlock Holmes, Batman, Adrian Monk, Shinichi Kudo. Each of these characters can look at the same crime scene as a room full of experts and sniff out a clue or a lead that eludes everyone else. The series of Death Note believes that detective work is strategy. The elusive criminal must be caught in a lie or trap. The detective must outthink them. L is a brilliant profiler. Where previous fictional detectives were expert crime scene investigators, L doesn't even need to visit the crime scene. Although he certainly isn't slacking in that respect either. His insight and intellect are so deep that he can see through murky mysteries, effortlessly, from half a planet away. He uses the insight he gleans from his profiling to predict how a criminal will act in any given scenario, and then springs a trap that's guaranteed to catch their foot. Which means that his skill set is uniquely suited to pursuing Kira, a killer who leaves no clues at crime scenes. L profiled Kira as someone who thinks like he does by analyzing his choice of targets, and determined the perfect strategy to draw him out. Like getting tricked into killing Lindell Taylor clearly shook him. He was embarrassed and intimidated publicly. L knew that Light, being petty, would try to get even. Light's experiments with the Death Note and subsequently killing the FBI agents was all it took for L to precisely pin down Kira's true identity. He only needed to place the surveillance cameras to verify his thoughts. So it could be said that from his first appearance, L had already devised the perfect plan to beat Kira. How did he manage to accomplish that? He explains it himself.
Kira is childish and he hates losing.
But how do you...
Just what do you mean?
Well, I'm also childish and I hate to lose. That's how I know.
L definitely thinks that Light is someone who thinks like he does to a certain extent. Like James Moriarty in Sherlock Holmes, or the Joker and the Batman, the criminal and the detective truly are two sides of the same coin. But they can't quite see eye to eye. Light actually kinda annoys L, and vice versa. From L's perspective, Light is a hypocrite for trying to abolish crime through criminal means. From Light's perspective, L rejecting Kira is childish and unrealistic. I imagine L also finds Light calling himself a god to be pretty gauche. When L calls Light his friend, he's basically making fun of himself as much as he is lying to Light. The thing they have in common is that they're both petty. One underrated aspect of L that I personally love is how much he looks down on Kira. This is somewhat ambiguous because some people still believe L and Light were friends, but I think the series goes out of its way to suggest that these two could only be friends in another life. Even when Light isn't Kira, L finds his moral high-roading pretty grating, but there's also validity to the view that L really did want to be Light's friend in spite of these grievances. Look at how sad L looks in this frame. This is right before he reports that he's separating from the task force to investigate Kira on his own. L's loneliness is somewhat ambiguous. L often doesn't show his true emotions, so the question of how comfortable he is in his solitude is hard to answer. But his solitude itself is undeniable. He does seem to enjoy going out to amusement parks and idol shows, which could indicate a desire for companionship and normalcy. But that could also just be him going out to enjoy fun activities. The only person he seemingly makes any attempt to befriend would be Naomi Misora. But Light Yagami, in theory, could be a friend of L's. It could be the case that L is trying to save his first friend from the wicked power to kill. The way they think is portrayed as being very similar, compared to other genius characters in the series who all have very divergent viewpoints. It's similar to why he calls himself childish, and says that's how he knows Kira is childish as well. The acknowledgement of that truth is likely very humorous to L. I find it interesting that before Kira, L may have been the most powerful man in the world. He can command police forces internationally without revealing his identity. This man has absurd clout. One has to wonder if he ever considered eliminating the vermin of the world, as Light put it. Maybe he doesn't agree with Light that much. L seems to simply believe that he is a detective and detectives solve murders. Although he is willing to sacrifice lives when it will count, like when the 13-day rule needs to be tested. Another thing that sets L aside from fictional detectives of his ilk is the nature of the mystery we see him tackle. Like other detectives on the list, he has a long career of solving seemingly impossible mysteries. But unlike most of them, he then encounters one that is actually impossible. Totally unrelated criminals from across the world are dying by the hundreds from seemingly natural causes. Aside from Batman, supernatural mysteries in fiction aren't usually tackled by investigators who use conventional logic as a main weapon. Usually in fiction, a supernatural villain is dealt with by determining what kind of monster they are, or what kind of power they possess. At which point their weaknesses are used against them, and typically there's no trial, they sort of just kill them. An example is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. L, on the other hand, is faced with a globe-trotting murderous specter. Forget one city, these crimes aren't even restrained to one hemisphere of the planet. The only leads are in who and why this enigma kills. The ambiguity and scope of this case is one far beyond what would normally be conceivable, even with a superpowered killer. It truly requires a great detective to whittle away at the suspect list until 7 billion names are narrowed down to one. We can't really blame L for thinking that it may all be the work of a genuine deific figure. When L considers the line of thought that Kira might actually be a god and not a human that could be punished by law, the idea of a deity from another world making him and all the other humans dance in his palm sends a chill down L's spine. The character he describes in this scene is actually Ryuk, but it's worth noting that Light was Shinigami-like enough for this idea to come to L's mind. This is partly because Light is not a reluctant killer. It's very easy for him to justify killing his particular targets and move on, much like most serial killers. What's unlike most serial killers is the degree of Light's conviction, which causes L some disgust. This moment is proof that however much he can agree with Light, he and Kira have a pretty fundamental disagreement. L believes that someone as childish and petty as Kira is not fit to rule the world. And so, he decides to put his life on the line to stop him. Hey folks, hope you enjoyed the video. It's good to be back analyzing Death Note again. I have much more to say about L, so be sure to subscribe for that. Comment Mogi Strawberry so I know you made it this far into the video. We're also going to be watching Death Note in the Discord server. You can join in on the fun at patreon.com/KatoYT. Anyone who pledges gains access to the patron-exclusive Discord server. Thank you all for listening to my dumb rants. Subscribe for more.